Welcome back to the channel, and I don't know if you've noticed, but I've certainly noticed there is something wrong with Marvel Comics right now. Even the good stuff that they have really isn't good at all, and I wanted to talk to my friend Jim, who reviews all the Marvel Comics and has a Marvel Comics podcast, see if he had the same interpretation of Marvel Comics right now. How you doing, Jim?
I'm doing great, and yes, Wes, I have the same interpretation, 100%.
It is so weird. Even the stuff that had been really good for quite some time, like Moon Knight, has taken a dramatic turn, like downward over the past 3 or 4 months. I thought Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil was the best comic book in the industry for like a year and a half straight. And right now, Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil just isn't very good coming out of his event where they took over New York and all that stuff. So even the stuff at the top isn't very good. And, you know, Donny Cates isn't doing Thor, isn't doing Hulk anymore. And it feels like everything is dead right now.
Yeah. And that's the problem. There's a big thing, and doing a podcast especially, I'll never drop a book from the podcast because it's bad. Sometimes those are fun to talk about. It evens things out. What I do is I drop things when I get so bored that I can't get through issues, and that's what seems to be happening with some of these big books. They are meandering, or they just feel like they've stuck around too long. Something like a Chip Zdarsky, me and you both agree, one of the best books in comics for a while. Now it almost feels like Jerry Rice on the Seattle Seahawks right now. You just kind of want him to retire. We've seen your best work, and it's just not now. Everything just seems to be boring, and nothing that I could say, oh my God, you have to read this, like it had been.
Yeah, it feels like there's a real creative problem right now. Like you look at the X-Men, which I think is probably the coldest line, even colder than the Avengers right now, is the X-Men titles. And the writer of the premier X-Men book is Jerry Duggan, who is a serviceable writer. He's not the worst thing in the world.
Okay, yeah.
But you would never put him on a premier title. He's somebody that's on your C or D team. He's third or fourth string. And he's like on the front lines with one of the premier titles in the entire industry because I don't think they can get anyone better.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And the funny play is I ended up dropping the X books, but the people I talk to who do like them, they'll never bring up that Jerry Duggan, the main book. They'll bring up Kieran Gillen, they'll bring up Immortal X-Men, stuff like that. Oh, but you have to have the main book hitting, and the whole line hasn't been hitting since Hickman left. It's obvious, and they're scrambling, they're trying to throw things in, but that's part of this bigger problem where there isn't any must-reads in my mind anymore at Marvel. Everything, again, feels stale. It feels like you're waiting for something bigger to be announced, and Marvel just isn't announcing that. They announce things, they're just not that good.
Well, they're doing a lot of events and stuff, and it feels like there's a lot of mystery box storytelling going on. Yeah. What has it been, like over a year since we heard about what happened in Pennsylvania or whatever with ASM?
Yep.
We still have no idea what that was about, and they started out Fantastic Four with the exact same mystery.
Yeah, and quite frankly, they did that in Hulk as well. Donny Cates' Hulk was, oh my God, What did Bruce Banner do? Like, why are you doing that? People get driven nuts by it. And the problem with ASM, with the Spider-Man and Zeb Wells, he seems to like taunting people about it. Like, ooh, we're not going to tell you. And it's such a crazy deal because Zeb Wells is just giving everybody what they don't want from Spider-Man. And that's, again, a huge book, and it'll always sell, so they get away with it, but fans aren't digging it, and it ends up being something that's driving people nuts.
Yeah, it's kind of weird when Nick Spencer was on the book, and I was not happy about that hire. And it wasn't always up, but there were some really high moments in his run. Mm-hmm. One of the things I liked about it was he was getting Peter and Mary Jane back together. Yeah. Like finally, after like a decade, they're going to make this right. He worked so hard to get there. And then when it was time to get over the finish line and really get there, he leaves Marvel. And it feels like, to spite him, they put Zeb Wells in the book. And now she's got kids with another guy.
Yeah, that makes no sense. And even when you had Nick Spencer, and it was going, you thought that they were going to get the marriage back. In the end, he did end up getting rid of Sins of the Past, which people were like, okay, that's fine. But when you jump from that to everybody excited, oh my God, Mary Jane and Peter together, to go the exact opposite with Zeb Wells, and even the idea of starting with that Beyond era that seemed like a cluster F through and through, and doing Ben Reilly stuff. And even promising hope for Ben Reilly and then throwing that away. It just feels like there's not good stories being told, but they're also throwing them against the fans of the books. And I just don't get it.
Yeah, so many events right now. We just got through, I think Dark Web ends this week.
Yep.
Sins of Sinister just picked up. We're in the middle of Avengers Assemble, and that's just the 3 events that were going on at the same time. And can you say any of them were good? I mean, the first issue of Sins of Sinister is admittedly a very good comic book.
Yep.
But after reading Axe Judgment Day, I don't expect it to keep up that kind of momentum. And then when you get through Dark Web and it ends up being nothing, a big nothing burger, talk to Doc about that.
Yeah.
And you're like, there's no expectations for any of the events. They're just doing the events for no reason whatsoever. No one asked for Jason Aaron to finish up or conclude his time on Avengers with this big team up book where the big reveal is somehow Loki is Avenger Prime.
Yeah. I mean, really, there's a thud right there. And what did you expect? Jason Aaron, a lot of people still will give him props, but this Avengers run has been boring.
Well, the God Butcher was 8 years ago, man.
Yeah. And he has been writing this Avengers book as a Jason Aaron's Presents book from the beginning. It spawned a bunch of failed miniseries, and then you get to the end and you get Loki as Avenger Prime. It makes it feel like you said, a lot of these events, they better realize that each event that ends up thudding pisses people off for the next event. And Marvel and DC gets thrown a lot of shade for, they're always doing these events. Marvel just throws them out there. They have no shame with that in number ones. They'll just throw them out there and see what sticks. Like you said, you can go at any point and have 3-4 events going at one point. And most of them are in air quotes because they mean nothing. This Dark Web was just inferno light nonsense and really didn't make any sense throughout the whole deal. And it derailed stuff like the Spider-Man book where we want to learn what happened with Mary Jane and Peter. We don't need sentient mailboxes and crap like that, right? Who needs that?
I think people were genuinely kind of excited about Chasm. Like, well, he's got a cool design. They're going to do something with Ben Reilly. And then when you get to the end, you're like, that was it?
Exactly. Like the big play ends up not even really being Ben Reilly. We thought, oh my God, they'll get a new status quo. This will make Ben more relevant. And then you just kind of push that aside. And it's just another thing like, really? Now you kick the Ben Reilly fans in the teeth and you just keep doing this. But the other things, like you said, Donny Cates not writing at this moment. He has personal problems and eventually he says he'll be back. But that was a huge loss for a lot of these books because then you just get these side writers coming in and there just doesn't feel like anything new and fresh because you get stuff like Danny Lord doing that Blade nonsense. Like, oh my God. Like, and that's the problem. And I know that a lot of people in the comments will probably say, hey, they got woke, got broke, stuff like that. It's beyond that. It's way beyond that. It's just lack of storytelling. Yeah, that's what it is. And it goes from the top down. And the weird play is that DC, you have the same problem, but it's a mystery of who's really doing what. These editors, Tom Brevoort and say Nick Lowe, and they just come right out. Yeah, no shame in their game. They'll come out and they'll backtalk what they just said. And I don't think that they have any idea what to do. They're just there to hire whoever they like and just keep them on books that fail, it seems. And that's one of the things. They stick with these writers way too long.
And they just constantly reboot series now. And there's no reason that a character like an Iron Man or a Captain America should be getting rebooted as much as like Captain Marvel. Those are premier characters in your line. Everyone knows who those characters are, and they're just being rebooted constantly. Captain America absolutely sucks right now.
It does.
No one is excited for what they're doing. There's 2 Captain Americas, and they're both awful. You would have think chances are one of them would be okay.
Yeah, and at one point you ended up having the Lansing and Kelly Steve looking like, okay, that's going to be the one, and people want classic deal. That book stinks. It stinks. It's not doing anything. Nobody's talking about it. And people can go and say, well, traditionally, the Captain America book doesn't sell, but people at least talk about it, right?
I did a video on the numbers. The baseline before Ta-Nehisi Coates took over Captain America, the minimum it could sell as the run was winding down before that was about 42,000 an issue. It's not even coming close to those numbers anymore.
And that's the
It's
problem.
more like around 25,000.
Yeah. So when they say this, like, it traditionally sold better than it is now, and people were talking about it, and there's more to it than just, straight up sales, which are the end all, that's the line in the sand deal, but there's nobody talking about the book, so there's not really a potential for the sales to increase or pick up. But that's the problem. You end up having Cantwell on Iron Man, but it's the side Iron Man that he's doing his wacky nonsense. Then there's no real great book for me to say, hey, you have to read this because you're a, certain fan of different things. There's a lot of wacky stuff.
The best thing I can talk about now maybe is Moon Knight or like Ghost Rider.
Yeah. And those are, there's fans for those characters and they're okay, but those are still not the tentpole books. The Marvel line is not going to die or thrive because of Ghost Rider or Moon Knight. Those are nice books to fill in a deal, but those are consistent. And I think that's the big play. We tend to now go with, okay, it's consistent. That's better than a lot. There's just a lot of crappy books right now. There's a lot of crap.
And you think about like the Captain America stuff, and I just recently looked at the sales. The Steve Rogers book, I think, is somewhere in the 70s. And the Sam Wilson Falcon Cap book is in the 150s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so no one's talking about it. The sales are bad, and they're heading up to the Civil War event. It's like, why?
Well, that's the same thing with, say, the Daredevil stuff. You have it come back.
Cold War. I'm sorry.
Yeah. You have the whole deal with Daredevil coming back, and it's going to tie into the Punisher book, but that's not really that interesting. And then it lessens the Daredevil deal, and everything seems to be just boring. It just seems to be something that the book is happening because it needs to happen, and hey, let's keep going with it instead of finding something, new. And like you said, a character like Captain America should have really good creative teams on it, and Lansing and Kelly are fine as just C-level deal. I'm saying they're like what they were.
A backup story.
Here's the funny play is that DC, what they used to be, where when people were leaving a run early, they would come in and finish it. They were the relievers that would come in, the closers, and they weren't even that great with that. Now they seem to be elevating themselves, but I don't see how they're not that good. But that's what you get.
Survivor, like who's going to be left at the end?
Exactly,
like Spider-Man.
And it's a problem with all the big two have a problem right now with quality of writers. It's very obvious, and retention, because unfortunately it's like, again, a sports analogy, it's the old Pittsburgh Pirates. Once you get better, you get the hell out of Pittsburgh. And that's what they end up. They get their brand and then they move on because the big two don't do anything to keep them. And it's starting to show. It's starting to bite them in the ass, really, because they don't have that good a writing crew.
So as somebody that talks to people behind the scenes, and I know you talk to some of the writers and editors and stuff, do you get a sense that they just have bad creators? Do they just have a mismanaged editorial staff? Do they have bad mandates that are ruining the line? Like, what's really going on here? My
biggest deal and my take on from listening to basically writers, some of the new ones, some of the older ones, is editorial. Editorial, first off, is hard to even get a hold of, they say. I have some writers that have told me, I have this story I want to pitch. I think it's the greatest thing ever. Nobody will answer the phone. They won't even listen to it. And even people wanting to know, well, what's the future of my book? How should I write this? Because some writers do care. And if they're writing a story that might end in 10 issues, they have to know that because they need to prepare for that. Or if they're told, okay, carte blanche, you'll be right. And they can't even get that because these editors, and this is really more at DC, but in general, it seems like the editorial staff, they don't know what they're doing. They're either, have their hands tied or they just don't care. I hate to say they don't care because I hope they would, but
I just think they're incompetent.
Yeah, it just seems like the people who are left in positions like that are the people who said yes, yes, yes to everything they were told. They're easy to boss around, and then they think of that, and it goes down to the writers, because then the writers are the ones they need to have be boss around, and you don't really get a lot of, interesting takes. Everything is vanilla. Everything is just there to put out a book with no real care if it's good or not. And, some of us still eat it up because we're fans and they're taking advantage of it. And it's a real shame that is going on.
It almost feels like the people that are left, like as staff for Marvel and DC, obviously we're talking about Marvel here, are the ones that couldn't get a better job somewhere else.
Yeah,
and they had to stay. They had no options anywhere else.
And because of that, they have no leverage. So if somebody says, you're going to do this and you're going to do that, that's what happens. And really, a big play of this is a lot of the stuff going on is pitched by editors, even written some parts by editors. And these editors are not good enough to do that.
I've heard that from a lot of Marvel writers, actually.
Yep.
Not so much at DC, is when their book is published, there will be dialogue that is completely different than what they submitted and was okayed as the finale of the script. And there will also be changes in the art where apparently the editor went to the artist and adjusted the story and never consulted with the writer.
Yeah, when you should have the deal of, hey, I don't like this page. Can you get together with the artist and figure out something like that so that...
How can we make it work?
Yeah. Nope. They don't do that. And that's just going to piss people off. And also, it's not going to make a really good flow in a comic to just change art without changing stuff with the writer not knowing. And they end up, their name's on the book, so they have to, at least know that. But they don't. And again, it's one of the bigger problems is that editorial disconnect with the writers, especially.
And that's like the big problem, because I remember like when my channel first really got some notoriety and we really started getting a presence here and people were noticing the channel, it wasn't because I was talking about how the comic books were bad. I was certainly talking about bad comics, but it was because I was talking about House of X and Powers of 10 and how exciting it was. And people were like, but Wes, you don't like change. There was so much change in House of X, Powers of 10. It's not even funny, but it was good change. It was refreshing change. It felt like something that mattered was happening. It felt like I was a part of something and I wanted to share that with people. At the same time, I think Absolute Carnage was happening. And it was really hot. And people wanted to talk about Marvel Comics and how great, specifically the X-Men were, and what they were going to do in the future. And there's none of that anymore. No. Everyone is just completely apathetic to what has happened after they saw how Marvel Comics just destroyed the most exciting thing to happen in X-Men in like 15 years.
Yeah, I got on X-Men because of it, and I was all fired up. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to get all fully involved. And then it just started going away from Hickman stuff eventually as he left, and that was it. But yeah, the hype of it, and that's what they're missing right now, that spark or buzz of the must read. And oh my God, everybody heard of it, even if they weren't X-Men fans or Marvel fans. They heard of it and wanted to see what it was all about. That you kind of even had that with Immortal Hulk at one point. Everybody's talking about that. Oh my God, I got to get and check it out. Yes. You had that Donny Cates on Venom was really exciting. Oh my God, he's doing this and it's really good. And that was the weird part of it where, yeah, now that's gone. And even having, say, this flip-flop Al Ewing then on Venom with Ram V, even that is just meandering. Everything feels like it doesn't have a full-out direction. Things do, and I know that Marvel has a different deal. It's more of line books in line with each other, the Spider-Man side of things and whatever. But nothing feels that connected overall, and it just feels like everything's just getting thrown out there. And if they have a problem, let's event it up. Hey, we'll do an event here. And it ends up feeling very artificial the way they're doing it. And it just doesn't excite anybody, I think.
Recently, Kieran Gillen was talking about where did Axe Judgment Day come from. I talked about the interview here on the channel, and he's like, well, that was supposed to be a story in Eternals, and Tom Brevoort came out and said, what can we turn into an event? And I said, I could add the X-Men and I could add the Avengers, and this could be an event book. So they ended up turning a bad Eternal story that was going to get canceled, never get told, and try to claim it was a big crossover event. There's a reason the comic book sucked, because the story was going to suck no matter what, because it was going to be on that Eternals run no one liked.
Yeah, you can't go and say, okay, this book is being canceled, but we'll grab that story and make it an event. I mean, an event? That's even worse than just saying, okay, you have this Eternal story. Let's, work it into the X-Men a little, but to call it an event that's insane. And yeah, I think that anybody with event fatigue can't be happy with what Marvel is putting out there. Everything's an event, and the events end up ending not doing much. So it's even worse.
They always retcon themselves by the end.
Oh, by the end, it all sets back, and you're like, why did I waste all my time and money with this? It's crazy. If you're going to go for it, then go for it. That's what makes things exciting. Even if it's not great, at least it gets some people talking. But at the end, you're like, okay, here's what we got. oh, well, we didn't get what we thought, but we'll just wait for the next one. And I just think, the House of Ideas, they pretty much run out of ideas, and they are just trying to keep their, head above water at this point.
Well, certainly they're doing better than DC Comics in sales.
Yeah,
and
they are.
DC Comics has some major issues. The stuff at the bottom of the barrel at DC, I think, is worse than the stuff at the bottom of the barrel at Marvel.
Yep.
Maybe other than some of the really bad X-Men titles, but DC has a lot of really bad stuff. But there is the Flash series. There is Batman, Superman, World's Finest. There is this Batman run by Chip Zdarsky, and they're really exciting comic books, and you can get excited about something. There's nothing that's even sniffing those books when it comes to quality out of Marvel. It feels like everything's just treading water and trying to be as average as possible.
Yeah, everything's mid. Everything you read is mid. And yeah, like you said, and this is not which is better, Marvel or DC, because both are having some major problems. But the idea with Marvel, they need to get those couple books up there, the books that, but I don't think that a Jason Aaron, now his run is ending and Jed McKay is going to jump on Avengers. But I didn't even see people excited about that. What I saw them say is, oh man, the quality of Moon Knight will go down. Like they're more concerned with Moon Knight than actually saying this will be a great Avengers deal. And I think that Moon Knight's been treading water for a while as well. It's one of the books that people were really jumping on. It's still solid, but it's not that must read in my mind anymore. And that's what they need. They need some spark. They need something. And you can't just throw events at people and think that that's going to do it. They need to I don't know what they can do, though. They need to change something, get some better writers on the bigger books, and don't mess around with them. Don't do this nonsense. Just tell a good story. I'm telling you, the idea of Mark Waid's World's Finest should be the blueprint for all the books. Just have fun, reference some old stuff in a modern way, and really just, do it, have fun, and write a cool story. That's all they need. Everybody's involved with all their nonsense.
That's right. It's not just you. Everyone is noticing that there's something wrong. There's something wrong at the core of Marvel Comics. We've talked about it here on the channel, and recently, CBR, one of the shill websites, has even started noticing there's something wrong with Marvel. Doc and I talked about this where they ran down what was destroying Marvel Comics, and they got a lot of it right. Definitely check this video out if you haven't seen it. There's also a link in the video description.